No one believed a kid from a house full of dying sisters could survive D-Day, get thrown out of acting school for having no talent, and become the most decorated actor in Hollywood history. They called him the king of character actors. The United States Army called him a hero. On a June morning in 1944, a 21-year-old private from Highland Falls, New York, waded into the freezing water off the coast of Normandy, France. The men around him were being cut down by machine gun fire before their boots touched sand. He would later say that the first man off his landing barge was killed instantly. The third man was killed instantly. He was the second man. He made it to the beach. Then he kept going. By the end of that day, he was the only man from his unit still breathing. Decades later, that same man would stand on a stage opposite Dustin Hoffman in a dress and dance a soft shoe so charming that the Academy nominated him for an Oscar. He would negotiate with Al Pacino in a hostage crisis. He would two-step with Dolly Parton. He would play Santa Claus 5 times. And when they asked him how a man who had crawled through the blood and mud of Omaha Beach ended up dancing on movie screens for a living, he gave an answer that explains everything you need to know about Charles Durning. He said, "I learned to dance because my legs were so full of shrapnel. That dancing was the only therapy that worked." This is the story of Charles Durning. And no one believed he would become any of these things. Here is why they were wrong. Number 1, a house full of dying sisters. He was born Charles Edward Durning on February 28, 1923, in Highland Falls, New York, a small Hudson River village pressed against the gates of the United States Military Academy at West Point. He was the 9th of 10 children in an Irish Catholic family that lived in the shadow of America's most famous military institution, but could not afford to feed itself. His father, James Durning, was an Irish immigrant and World War I veteran who had lost a leg in the trenches and been poisoned by mustard gas. He was too sick to work for most of Charles's childhood. His mother, Louise Leonard Durning, kept the family alive by washing the cadets' uniforms by hand. And the grief inside that house was almost biblical. 5 of Charles's sisters died young of smallpox or scarlet fever. 3 of them died within a single 2-week span. When his father finally succumbed to his war injuries around 1935, 12-year-old Charles was left in a household where death was not a visitor. It was a permanent resident. Of the 10 Durning children, only 5 survived to adulthood. Charles was the youngest of the survivors. A school counselor told him he had no aptitude for art, languages, or math, and should learn office skills. He dropped out at 16 in 1939 and left home. He told people later he did it to leave his mother one less mouth to feed. He was a child walking out into the Depression with nothing. And the Depression was not even the worst thing that was coming for him. Number 2, the kid who got laughs at a burlesque house. For the next 4 years, Charles Durning chained together the kind of jobs that America used to grind through teenagers who had no one looking out for them. He worked in a munitions factory. He shoveled slag heaps. He strung barbed wire at a fencing plant. He picked crops on a Pennsylvania farm. And then he landed in Buffalo, New York, where he got a job as an usher at a burlesque house. One night, the regular comedian was too drunk to go on. Durning, who had memorized the man's entire act just from watching it night after night, talked the manager into letting him take the stage. He got laughs. He told the New York Times decades later, "I was hooked." That was the moment. Not acting school, not a drama teacher, not a mentor, a drunk comic who did not show up for work. That is how Charles Durning found his calling. But before he could answer it, the United States Army found him first. Number 3, the second man off the barge. Durning entered the Army on January 17th, 1943. He trained at Camp Edwards, Massachusetts, then Fort Polk, Louisiana, and shipped to England on February 18th, 1944. On the morning of June 6, 1944, he landed on the beaches of Normandy as part of the Allied invasion of France, the largest amphibious military operation in human history. In 2007, standing on the stage of the PBS National Memorial Day concert on the National Mall in Washington, introduced by Tom Hanks, Durning described what happened next. "I was the second man off my barge, and the first and third man got killed. All around me, people were being shot at. I saw bodies all over the place, but you did not know whether they were alive or dead." He recalled wounded men crawling forward on the sand to use their own bodies as shields for the men behind them. His sergeant told him it was good to be scared. We all are. By the end of that day, Durning was the only man from his unit still alive. Now here is what our research uncovered that most accounts leave out. Military historian Steve Karras, working from surviving morning reports, found that Durning's paper trail places him in the 17th Replacement Depot on D-Day itself, which may mean he arrived in Normandy as a replacement shortly after the initial landing rather than in the literal first wave. The records that would settle this question were destroyed in the 1973 National Personnel Records Center fire in St. Louis. Historian Alex Kershaw put it this way: even if he had not been on Omaha Beach in the first wave, what he experienced was massive trauma. It is enough to haunt anyone for life. Number 4, the mine that blew him apart. What is firmly documented by hospital records is what happened 9 days after D-Day. On June 15, 1944, near the village of Les Mars, France, a German S-mine known as a Bouncing Betty exploded near Private First Class Charles Durning. The 24th Evacuation Hospital at Lecombe recorded his injuries in clinical detail: severe concussion, multiple lacerations to the face, fragmentation shrapnel, wounds to the right frontal region of his head, his left chest wall, both legs, his left foot, his knee, his fingers, and his hands. His entire body was peppered with metal. His son Douglas later described what that looked like decades afterward. "My father's body was completely peppered with shrapnel. Face, chest, and head. When we were young, I could put my fingers through the bullet holes in his leg." Durning spent approximately 6 months in English hospitals recovering. He was declared fit for full field duty on December 6, 1944. 10 days before the Germans launched their last desperate offensive in the Ardennes forest. The timing could not have been worse. They sent him right back into hell. Number 5, the Boy with the Bayonet. During the Battle of the Bulge, in the winter of 1944 and 1945, Durning experienced something he could not speak about for nearly 50 years. In a 1993 interview with Parade magazine, he finally described it. "I was crossing a field somewhere in Belgium. A German soldier ran toward me carrying a bayonet. He could not have been more than 14 or 15. I did not see a soldier. I saw a boy. Even though he was coming at me, I could not shoot. The boy stabbed him 7 or 8 times before Durning seized a rock and killed him with it. And then Charles Durning, a 21-year-old private from Highland Falls, New York, sat in that frozen Belgian field and held the dead boy in his arms and wept. That image, a soldier cradling the child he just killed, that is the image Charles Durning carried inside him for the rest of his life. It is the image that explains everything that came after. The silence, the drinking, the decades of nightmares, and eventually the acting. He was captured during the Bulge and survived a German execution of prisoners. By his own account, he escaped by playing dead and crawling through frozen underbrush while bullets flew overhead. He was wounded a 3rd time in March of 1945, taking a bullet to the chest while moving into Germany. He told reporters he carried that bullet inside his body for the rest of his life. When he was finally discharged at Fort Dix, New Jersey on January 30th, 1946, Private First Class Charles Durning had earned the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and the Combat Infantryman Badge. He was 22 years old. He looked like he was 40. Number 6, thrown out for having no talent. He came home and dropped into what he later called a void for almost a decade. He was in and out of hospitals. He had developed a stutter. His legs were so damaged from shrapnel that he took dance lessons as physical therapy. When he finally felt stable enough to pursue the dream that had started in that Buffalo burlesque house, he enrolled in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York on the GI Bill, and they threw him out in less than a year. The verdict they gave him was devastating. They basically said, "You have no talent, and you could not even buy a dime's worth of it if it was for sale." Expelled alongside him for the same alleged lack of ability was a young actor named Jason Robards, who would go on to win 2 consecutive Academy Awards. 6 decades later, in 2007, the Academy invited Durning back as a legend of the Academy and named a scholarship in his honor. But in 1947, he was just a broken veteran with a stutter and no prospects. What followed was the longest grind in Hollywood history. Durning worked as a doorman, a dishwasher, a cab driver, a telegram delivery man, a bridge painter, a bricklayer, a plumber's helper, a bartender, a night watchman, an iron worker, an elevator operator, a waiter, and briefly a professional boxer who fought at Madison Square Garden under the name Red Costello. His most reliable job was teaching ballroom dancing at the Fred Astaire Dance Studio in Manhattan. "Every time I was out of work, they would give me a job as a dance teacher," he told theater historian Ron Fassler. "Dancing came easy to me. Acting came hard." Number 7, Joseph Papp opened the gates of heaven. His professional acting career began around 1951 with stock company productions and off-Broadway shows. But the man who truly saved Charles Durning was Joseph Papp, the legendary founder of the New York Shakespeare Festival. Beginning in 1962, Papp hired Durning for production after production. Over the next dozen years, Durning appeared in 35 plays for Papp, performing Shakespeare in Central Park and premiering new works by David Rabe, Sam Shepard, and David Mamet at the Public Theater. Papp's confidence, Durning told the Washington Post, opened up the gates of heaven for me. There were brutal setbacks along the way. In 1964, he was cast as the priest in the original out-of-town tryout of Fiddler on the Roof. His role was cut before the show reached Broadway. He had to walk past the Fiddler on the Roof marquee for 7 years, knowing he had been inside that show and been thrown out of it. But he kept going. He always kept going. And in 1972, at the age of 49, everything finally changed. Jason Miller's play, That Championship Season, opened at the Public Theater on May 2nd, 1972, and transferred to the Booth Theater on September 14th. It ran 700 performances and won the 1973 Pulitzer Prize for Drama. Durning played the corrupt small-town mayor George Sikowski. He won the Drama Desk Award. He was 49 years old and finally a star. From the day he was discharged at Fort Dix to that opening night was 26 years and 8 months. 26 years of doorman jobs and dance lessons and being told he had no talent. Number 8, The Sting, Dog Day Afternoon, and the dance that got him an Oscar nomination. Director George Roy Hill saw Durning in That Championship Season and cast him as the dirty Joliet cop, Lieutenant William Snyder in The Sting, the 1973 Best Picture winner, starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford. The film grossed $156 million. And Charles Durning was now a working Hollywood actor. What followed was one of the most remarkable filmographies in character acting history. He played Detective Sergeant Eugene Moretti, opposite Al Pacino, in Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon in 1975, earning a Golden Globe nomination and the National Board of Review's Best Supporting Actor award. He played the villain Doc Hopper in The Muppet Movie in 1979. He played Jessica Lange's father in Tootsie in 1982, the man who falls charmingly in love with Dustin Hoffman in a dress. And in 1982, he played the governor of Texas in The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, where his sidestep dance number with Dolly Parton earned him his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor at the 55th Oscars on April 11th, 1983. The following year, he received his second Oscar nomination for Mel Brooks's To Be or Not to Be, playing the bumbling concentration camp Earhart. 2 consecutive Oscar nominations for a man who had been told he could not buy a dime's worth of talent. He lost both times. He never won an Oscar, but he never stopped working. Burt Reynolds, who appeared with him in 13 films and considered Durning his closest friend, wrote in his memoir, "But enough about me. Charlie was without a doubt the best actor I ever worked with. Everything he did was completely real. It was never like he was reciting lines. It was like he was talking to you." Number 9. The man who could not stop working. In 1990, at the age of 67, Durning won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a play for his performance as Big Daddy in a revival of Cat on a hot tin roof opposite Kathleen Turner. That same year, he joined the cast of Evening Shade alongside his best friend Burt Reynolds, playing Dr. Harlan Eldridge for 98 episodes over 4 seasons. He won the 1991 Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor in a series for the Kennedys of Massachusetts. He was inducted into the Theatre Hall of Fame in 1999. In 2000, at the age of 77, he delivered one of his greatest performances as Mississippi Governor Pappy O'Daniel in the Coen brothers' Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, opposite George Clooney. In total, his career spanned more than 200 credited roles, 9 Emmy nominations, 4 Golden Globe nominations, a Tony, the Screen Actors Guild Life Achievement Award, presented to him by Burt Reynolds on January 27, 2008. A star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, dedicated July 31, 2008, placed beside the star of his childhood idol, James Cagney. And in April of 2008, the French government awarded him the Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur for his service in the liberation of France. He was 85 years old, and he was still working. He told the Associated Press, "I never turned down anything and never argued with any producer or director. They are going to carry me out if I go." He played Santa Claus in 5 television movies. He never lost weight, and critics marveled at how a heavy man could be so impossibly light on his feet. The answer, of course, was those dance lessons, the ones he started because his legs were full of shrapnel, and dancing was the only therapy that worked. Number 10, Arlington. Charles Durning died on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2012, at his home in Manhattan. He was 89 years old. Broadway dimmed its marquee lights on December 27th in his honor. The actor Jack Klugman died on the same day, and the New York Times called the 2 men extraordinary actors, ennobling the ordinary. After a private family service, Charles Edward Durning was interred at Arlington National Cemetery on February 21, 2013, in Section 66, Grave 127, along MacArthur Drive. Full military honors. The kid from Highland Falls, the boy who grew up in a house full of dying sisters, the soldier who held a dead German boy in his arms and wept, the veteran who was told he had no talent, the doorman and dishwasher and dance teacher who did not become a star until he was 49 years old, was laid to rest among presidents and generals and Medal of Honor recipients, because that is where heroes go. At the 2013 PBS National Memorial Day concert, taps was sounded for the man who had stood on that same stage for 17 consecutive years. For 17 years, he had tried to say the things he could not say when he was young. And the truest thing he ever said was this: there are many secrets in us, in the depths of our souls, that we do not want anyone to know about. There is terror and repulsion in us. The terrible spot that we do not talk about. That place that no one knows about. Horrifying things we keep secret. A lot of that is released through acting. Here is what the record shows. Charles Edward Durning was born in a house where 5 of his sisters died of disease before they grew up. His father lost a leg in the First World War and died when Charles was 12. His mother washed uniforms by hand to feed the survivors. He dropped out of school at 16 and worked in factories and burlesque houses. He landed on the beaches of Normandy and was the only man from his unit to survive. He was blown apart by a German mine at Les Mars. He killed a teenage boy with a rock and held him while he cried. He survived a German execution of prisoners in the Ardennes. He came home with the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and a bullet in his chest that never came out. He was thrown out of acting school for having no talent. He worked as a doorman, a cab driver, a boxer, and a dance teacher for 2 decades. He did not become a star until he was 49. He earned 2 Oscar nominations, a Tony, a Golden Globe, and more than 200 screen credits. He danced with Dolly Parton and Fred Astaire. He played Santa Claus 5 times, and he was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. No container of talent could hold that man, and no battlefield could stop him. His friend Burt Reynolds said it best. Charlie was without a doubt the best actor I ever worked with. Everything he did was completely real. It was never like he was reciting lines. It was like he was talking to you. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and join us as we uncover the forgotten legends of classic Hollywood. Because the stories that Hollywood buried are the ones that deserve to be told. And somewhere in Arlington National Cemetery in Section 66, Grave 127, along MacArthur Drive, the kid from Highland Falls who danced his way out of a war and acted his way out of a void is still telling the truth, the way he always did, the only way he knew how.